And today's topic is what's new in Azure Migrate, and I'll delve a little deeper into the agenda in a second. As always, I'll keep it quick, but I just want to cover off us as Transparity to give you an idea of who we are if you haven't met us before or been on one of these webinars. So the name Transparity comes from the transformation, partnership and clarity that you can see there on the screen, which very much makes up our culture. We are a pure play Microsoft partner, and we very much aligned with Microsoft's verticals, meaning we have practices in Azure, of course, data and AI, app innovation, security, modern work, also known as digital workplace, and business apps, things like Dynamics. So we align with Microsoft. We are that pure play partner. We have a solution partner designation for each of those verticals, so all 6. We also have the Azure Expert MSP status, alongside, I believe it's 13 advanced specializations. So we're well accredited, one of the most, if not the most accredited in the UK. But as you can see there, we are extremely close to Microsoft as a partner, and we're very proud of the achievements and some of the certifications that we've gained over the years. So to talk about today. There's quite a bit we're going to touch on actually in the 30 minutes. A good way of looking at this is kind of 50% of it's going to be looking at migrations as a whole, but specifically the decisions that you have to make and the information that can give you kind of, or allow you to make informed decisions. So it's around the process and the different decisions. And then the second part is around the tool set that Microsoft provide and how that can assist you with those decisions, specifically some of the new features of that tool set. So that's what we're going to focus on today. That's very much the agenda for today. I want to start by displaying some kind of common, not all of them, but common questions that you often have to think about when you are looking to embark on a migration journey. We deal with these questions every day with customers. Actually, we deal with a hell of a lot more questions than this, but I want to think about this in terms of, what are your motivations, whether they be data center exit or reducing a head count or whatever that could be. What are your desired outcomes? And when we talk about those, we don't mean I want to move to the cloud, which, believe it or not, we hear quite a lot. We're talking about a lower level there. What are the fiscal outcomes you want to get from this migration? Technical, regulatory, for example, security based. There's many different outcomes. What is your timeline? Do you already have the skills? Do you have any Azure skills in-house? And of course, what is your migration budget? And the reason I ask these questions is really to frame today, because all of you on the call and every customer we've ever dealt with have different answers to these questions. But those answers are the first part of kind of starting to understand your migration strategy, because based on the answers to these questions, you have decisions to make. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about those decisions and the tooling that can assist in those decisions, because there are some less complex ways of moving to Azure. There are some quicker ways of moving, for sure, even some cheaper ways, but they may not always tick off all of your outcomes and your motivations. So just to frame the day with those questions. Now, the tool we're going to speak about today is Azure Migrate. There are other tools out there, third-party tools that can do other things, but today we will just focus on the functionality of Azure Migrate and how that can assist. So for those of you who haven't seen the kind of service before, it allows you to discover, assess, and migrate workloads into Azure. They could be physical servers, virtual machines, apps, SQL, containers, data, much more, VDI. They could also live in another cloud. They could be in AWS or they could be in GCP. It discovers them, first of all, and again, we're not going to get into the technicality of that, but it discovers the workloads. It can assess them, which we will touch on today, and that may be assessing them for compatibility, for pricing, for dependencies, connections to other services. On top of that assessment, something we will touch on today in more detail is the ability now to view a business case. This is not new functionality, but it has been updated and it hasn't been around for too long. Azure Migrate itself is a tool that's widely used across a lot of partners and a lot of internal businesses. It is the native and free tool to migrate. So of course, that's why it's our tool of choice. You can integrate it with third-party tools as well, an assessment. Some of you may have done that already. But again, today we're going to focus more on the kind of built-in native functionality, native and free, as I've popped there as the last kind of point, and that's an important point. The assessments are there to kind of, or the tooling there is there to very much assist you in the two phases of highlighting at the bottom. The two, as I've mentioned, we'll focus on today. Assess and decide. What are your decisions and how do you get information to help you and to make informed decisions and really create your strategy, your plan? How are you going to move? What are you going to get from it? What will it look like on the other side? So, you know, how can the tooling assist you in those two phases? What I've popped up on the screen here, and you know, we're not going to go into every option in detail. It's very, you know, it's not really the kind of focus for this, but I wanted to kind of remind you really of the fact that there are options, and there are actually far more options than I'm displaying on the screen right now. However, the technical journeys that I'm showing on the screen in terms of migration or modernize, these are the current journeys that are supported by Azure Migrate. Out of the box, these are the type of journeys that you can look to do at the moment. First of all, obviously there's server, whether that be a physical server, whether that be a virtual machine, that could be a you know, private clouds, that could be on premises, and a really common migration strategy for various reasons is pick it up, put it into an Azure VM, also known as a lift and shift. This can be great, you know, it's quick, it's simple, there's minimal modifications needed, but at the same time, there's always downsides. There's still going to be a lot of management overhead for those workloads. Similar to VMware, you can have VMware running on premises, and you can essentially pick up that service and run it from Azure. Again, you're still going to have a lot of management overhead there. You're not going to gain all the capabilities of Azure Cloud. But what it does mean is if you move VMware is that you can keep the same people, skilling and tools. And that's actually an area we're going to focus on today. So I'm not going to go too deep into AVS right now. In terms of SQL, again, you could go the sit quick route, you know, load that onto a virtual machine and run it in Azure, or you could go more towards the right in terms of using a managed instance or a SQL database. And depending on costs, timeline, internal knowledge, those questions I asked on the first slide really depends on which of these routes right now you can go down. Web apps, again, there are actually more kind of target solutions than what I'm showing here, but you could go simple, you could go for a VM again, or you could move more towards the right and maybe look to use something like an app service or even Azure containers or Azure Kubernetes service. VDI solutions, whether that's Citrix, whether that's RDS. Again, Citrix do have a desktop as a service solution for Azure, or you could look to run more natively there in terms of Azure Virtual Desktop. And a final one, which has been added very recently, this is a new feature, but the ability to assess and migrate Spring apps. And that's really any type of Spring app. That could be microservices, event-driven, batch, whatever that may be. The yellow ones on the screen are really the more kind of the simpler moves, you know, and everyone might be thinking, well, why not take those? They're the simplest ones, but they're not always the most cost effective. And again, you're not going to gain as much from the kind of the cloud or Azure ecosystem as you would if you start to use the services that are in blue. And we're not going to talk about all these journeys today because we have 30 minutes, but the tooling and some of the new features I'm going to talk about, the ones that you can see starred on there, VM, AVS, App Service and Spring, they are affected by these new changes. So again, if you're looking to take these type of journeys, you now have even more information to make that informed decision. So first feature I want to talk about is app and code assessment. So as I previously mentioned, Azure Migrate is the recommended tool for performing end-to-end server discovery, assessments, and migration. However, up until this point, those assessments, even when reviewing applications, have been done at a configuration level. They haven't had access to the actual application code. This has now changed. So for scenarios where you need a deeper analysis of those applications to really understand what's going on at a code level, this is what's been provided with this service. It can assess .NET or Java apps. It can look at them and understand, okay, if you want to move this to a container app or app service, how compatible is it? It will identify any compatibility issues. It will give you the exact line of code, provide you with a recommended solution, and even give you an idea of how much time that would take. So you can already start to see that this information would really help in terms of business cases, understanding timelines, how much professional services or development time you may need. And so it's very much looking at a much lower level now. You can customize it. So it can be for specific use cases, not just the target services displayed on this slide. And as I've mentioned, it provides a report, which I'll show you in a second. And that can be accessed via a GUI or CLI. So again, this is new functionality in Azure Migrate, free functionality. There are solutions out there that have existed prior to this that could do this. I think Cloud Pilot's one of them. There are some others, paid for services. So, you know, you may have been fortunate enough to get this type of information previously. We have had access to some of those third-party solutions, but the fact that this is now being added by Microsoft alongside all their other solutions and assessments is really getting them towards this kind of one-stop shop for all those different journeys. And again, it's free and it uses a GUI. Once you set it up, this is an example for .NET, okay? You can, as you see there, review multiple projects at once. So the projects is the amount of projects that have been scanned. You can view the number of unique issues across the scan or across the assessment. So that's what the issues number is. The incidents is the total number of issues across everything. And story points is an estimated effort to fix all of those issues. And as you can see on the right there, that could be anything from runtime to databases. But you'll see from this screen that when you click on the error to understand it, as you can see there, it's giving you the exact location, the line number. It's letting you know the severity and how to resolve that as well. This could then be used to fill a DevOps boards in terms of issues there. So if you're working in a DevOps way and your developers need to make some of these edits to then go into testing, this is extremely useful, of course, to do that and start to create some of those issues. So new service. It's only .NET and Java at this moment in time, although that's good in itself. Really easy to set up. If you're using Java, it's a package. If you're using .NET, as long as you're using Visual Studio, you can install that and get to this screen pretty quickly. But again, it's just around that you're going to get more data to make that informed decision, and that's really why I wanted to talk about this. I think it's a really useful addition to the tool set from Microsoft. But as I've mentioned before, it's not anything new in the world of this technology, but it is very much new from a native point of view. Something which is useful and in my opinion not used as much as it should be is the service of business case. So any of you that's run an assessment in Azure Migrate before, you know, that is a technical assessment for sizing, compatibility, operating system, and so on. But that wouldn't paint the full picture or give you all the information you need to make those decisions. So this is the other side of that. And this very much helps with kind of guesswork in terms of your cost planning. It can give you a lot of data that can help with calculations around total cost of ownership, security or management, for example. So The business case is a report, which I'll show you in a second. Once you run an assessment, it can show you things such as my on-premises costs versus my Azure costs and total cost of ownership, year-on-year cash flow analysis, utilization insights into your workloads at the moment, any type of quick wins. It can identify some quick wins for you, so maybe some low-hanging fruit services and migrations that you should focus on early on, cost savings and potential cost savings, and also kind of readiness and cost for things such as Defender, but also extended security updates. So if any of you was on our last webinar presented by me, it was around the fact that obviously Windows 2012 is now expired. You need to take up extended security updates to be updated there and secure. And business case can now show you some of the options and the possible pricing around that as well. The new features, which are now included, are a welcomed addition, to be honest. So in the past, if you run an assessment in Azure Migrate on workloads, it was very good at saying, right, we've assessed 150 VMs, it will cost you 25 grand a year in Azure. But that never painted the full picture, because the truth is you needed updates, monitoring, security, a landing zone, a lot of different services, which actually add to that cost. And for partners like ourselves, we would often take the assessment and then manually look into those other services. Microsoft have now added this into the business case, so they will take into account how much will it cost to update these services, to back them up, to monitor them as well. So you are getting more information and that more holistic view of what the potential TCO actually would be. And before we look at images of that, there are different strategies, journeys, whatever you want to call it, that are supported by this business case, whether that's what references Azure recommended, which is it looks across all the different journeys, all the different target services, and identifies the cheapest ones to run. That may not always be VMs, by the way. You could choose a strategy of straight migrating or maybe modernizing to PaaS. So it still works with things such as, well, actually, I want to know my TCO if it goes in app service or Kubernetes service, for example. So again, it's painting that bigger picture. To see what one of them looks like, depending on your estate, depending on your kind of journey that you've selected, these can look different. But on this first image, the kind of main thing to understand here is that it's out of the box, it will predict your on-premises costs, and that's how it can show you current versus future state costs. Now, you can edit assumptions on this down to the point where you can tell them how much it's costing you for licensing, how much it costs you for your electric kilowatt per hour, how much electric you're using. The more info you know now, the more you put into this, the better the results will be in terms of the output. But it does have a list of assumptions based on Microsoft's experience. So I wouldn't expect it to be wildly out. But just so you're aware, this is not something that's basically always fixed to make Azure look better. You can put in your own factual data here, down to wages of your teams and everything like that, and it will start to work it out for you. Delve a little deeper into this business case. This one's based on AVS. So as you can see, it shows you a little bit more information, total cost of ownership comparison, the amount of servers that are ideal for the cloud. If you see in the top right, it'll show you the savings you're going to make if you used hybrid benefit, and the savings you'll make with extended security updates. Because don't forget, if you are here now with operating systems that are out of date, if you move them to Azure, they will be supported for free for 3 years. Otherwise, that cost can start to stack up. So really useful, something we do a lot. Many of these for customers. We have our own custom output actually for these business cases, and we create kind of a transparency deck to pull this info. But again, it's free and it's part of Azure Migrate, and it helps you make those informed decisions. Really quickly, something that's been fairly new but can also be useful. I spoke earlier on around one of the journeys being a lift and shift, that you take a server from wherever it is now and put it into Azure. Believe it or not, one of the more common migration journeys we see around that is actually something called a rebuild, which is let's build from fresh in Azure and move the app over. That could be due to out-of-date operating systems, It could do with the fact that you're migrating, so maybe it's a good time to move to a newer OS. There is now functionality in Azure Migrate to do this for you. Now, any techies on the call will instantly have alarm bells ringing here. Anyone that's ever updated a server in place isn't always the nicest thing to do. So the functionality is there. As you can see at the bottom now, when you go to migrate into Azure, it will give you options if it can upgrade the OS. Now, you can do this kind of side by side, so you can actually do this into a test environment first to actually check your applications and make sure that it actually works before going into live. So it's a new functionality. It supports Windows Server 2008 upwards. It does have to be fully licensed, standard data center or enterprise. And as it mentions at the top, it will keep your settings, your roles, and your data very much intact. But again, extra functionality, taking a little risk out of it, giving you the ability to do a quick check. What would it be like if this app was running on a newer OS? Again, natively within the Azure Migrate system. And my final kind of feature, although not new, AVS isn't something new, but it is something that's top of mind at the moment. And it's a migration path that is definitely about to increase over the next few years or so. So I don't know if all of you would be aware, but there's been recent news around VMware price hikes, significant price hikes, and a likely subscription model. There's been a lot of research done over the last few weeks, some of them showing around 20 to 40% of people on VMware now stating that they need to leave as soon as possible. So Azure VMware solution may be for you if you're one of those people. As I mentioned earlier, if you've got VMware now, you can run VMware in Azure. You could use that if you needed to reduce your footprint quickly, if you need to get away from the price hikes quickly. You can even use it for BCDR purposes, so you could use Azure as a secondary or primary site. But there are actually some really good benefits from this service. First of all, it's very much an accelerated migration. Thousands of VMs can be done extremely quickly using HCX technology. You can retain your IP addresses. You can't do this normally if you use Azure Migrate, if you move a virtual machine from on-prem into Azure, or at least you can't do it easily. You don't have to change a single IP address or MAC address if you do it this way. It allows you to incrementally modernize workloads. So maybe you need to get out of that data center or contract now, maybe use this solution first, but then you can always loop back around and start to look at those other journeys. And more importantly, it's the same tools, the same skill set, the same knowledge requirements as it would be as you were doing now on-prem. So again, if the answers to those questions at the start was my timeline's quick, my knowledge in Azure is low, my motivation is to get out of this current contract that's about to be hiked, AVS may be the solution for you. And finally, I just want to end, or kind of end on this, just to wrap everything back up. As I mentioned earlier on, doing migrations is not as quick as just picking things up and dropping it in Azure. In fact, at Transparency, we prefer not to do that. We prefer to modernize as much as we can so you can really gain the benefit. But we understand that everyone has different requirements. But whether you're discovering the workloads, assessing them, making decisions, or even migrating them, as you can see there, the Azure Migrate tool has you covered in a lot of those areas. I'm not going to say it's perfect. There's definitely some improvements, and partners like ourselves, we're here to kind of fill some of those gaps. But it's really good to see that Microsoft are continuing with this tool, and whenever a new technology is released, they're really looking at how to add that into this tool, so you again get that data that you need for those decisions. Final piece from me is we offer, or Microsoft offer, a funding program called AM, previously AMP, Azure Migrate and Modernize. This suits pretty much every single strategy or journey that I've touched on today. It can be used to fund assessments, infrastructure and databases, AVS, VMware solution, apps, VDI, and even SAP. This is not available to all customers, and it is based on the first year's kind of predicted consumption. But if that is something you're interested in, please reach out, please ping in the chat. that is something that we work really closely with Microsoft to do. And then in terms of what else we have to offer, we can provide, based on a kind of, you know, if you're if you're able to get the funding, we'll check that for you. We can provide a 2-day rapid assessment, almost like a workshop, funded by Microsoft, touching on almost everything I've spoken about today in detail. We will set the tools up. We will leave the tooling to assess. We will go in, run various assessments, take the business case, create custom outputs, and then sit through a 2-hour to 3-hour workshop with you, going through those options and really helping you start to decide on your strategy and put your business case together. So if you are interested in that, there should be a poll. It may have already popped up, but there should be a poll popping up any second by Susie. But yeah, that's something we can offer. And again, very much focused on what we've been talking about today. I'm going to leave this on the screen because it is 28 minutes past, which is perfect timing from me. Apologies if it felt like I was rushing a little bit there at the end. I was conscious of time, but are there any questions that anyone has? And also, Susie, are there any in the chat? While we've got a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Anthony. Can't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but I'm keeping an eye on it.
We'll give it a few more seconds. We won't sit here for too long because we're not very good at awkward silence as Brits, but if there are any questions after this, as always, if you catch me on LinkedIn or you can contact Transparity, feel free to reach out. If you want me to explain anything a little deeper that I've touched on today, I'm always available, as are Transparity. No questions, Susie?
No, still no questions, Anne.
Not a problem. So yeah, as long as the poll's there, I think it's okay with you, Susie. We will leave it there, almost bang on time, which is rare for me. Feel free to look out for any more webinars from Transparity. They are on our website. You'll see them on LinkedIn. We've got quite a lot going over the next few months. So if you're interested in those, check them out. But thank you very much, as always, for attending. And yeah, hope to see you on the next one. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.